Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Cashflow Unscripted. My name is Ankur Bagheria. First off, my very best wishes for this festive season to everyone listening in, to their families and friends from all of us here at Cashflow. Unscripted is a podcast coming to you from India with topical insights from leaders of the Indian business and the finance community. Um, I have today here with me Mrs. Vidya Srinivasan. Vidya is currently Executive Director and CFO at Puma India. She has a wealth of experience, over 20 years of post qualification experience in areas of finance, strategy, business planning, commercial, and management. She's held multiple leadership positions with the Aditya Birla Group, with Glenmark, and with Kearney. Vidya is a chartered accountant and an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. Today, we plan to touch upon a couple of interesting topics with Vidya, from her outlook on the sports apparel and more broadly the retail sector in India, to her views on the future of workplace and future of women at the workplace. So we're really excited to have you here, Vidya. Welcome to Cashflow
Thank you.
Unscripted.
Thanks for having me here.
Fantastic. Now, Vidya, it's no mystery that COVID has had a deep impact on the broader apparel sector in India. With shops closed and consumer spending sort of refocused on, almost entirely on necessities and essentials. It's caused a lot of challenges and reshuffling of plans for for a number of corporates in the consumer sector. Would love to hear from you on, what was the outlook for Puma, let's say pre-COVID, and how has COVID impacted your overall business plans?
So Puma obviously was doing quite well prior to COVID. I think 2019, our sales growth was significant. Q1 also we grew both same store sales growth as well as e-commerce channel growth was quite very healthy and well in line with our plans for the year. Obviously, with the lockdown, Q2 got impacted. We practically had no stores open in April, as was everybody else. And we also had shipment delays in the later part of Q2 once the markets opened up or started opening up. Now we have kind of lived through the various phases of unlock. And as that has happened, we have obviously seen our stores opening up in different parts of the country. We're still, partly open full time, some working for limited hours, limited number of days, depending on what the restrictions are in that particular geography. And what we are seeing is that we are getting good traction. Obviously, walk-ins continue to be impacted, though they are jumping up in as we progress. But our average transaction value has gone up significantly. We are also seeing a lot of growth in e-commerce, and especially versus last year. Also, e-commerce is growing in very healthy numbers. So I think that is really helping us from a business perspective. I think the other thing is from a category standpoint, which is the other question that you asked me. I think compared to other retail categories, the whole area of athleisure, sports apparel are actually doing very well because obviously as customers are at home, they want to dress in a more relaxed, comfortable perspective. I think at least anecdotally, we see that the investment in fitness has gone up. I think people are, even within the concept of not being able to go to the gym till some time back, people are walking, running, jogging as much as they can do within the confines of their homes or their societies. And I think that is reflecting in, our apparel share has grown significantly compared to last year also. We are seeing, traction in the category compared to, I guess, other retail categories.
Interesting. And if I may ask, how has how is e-commerce as a share of your overall channel changed post-COVID? If you're at the liberty of, giving us some insight there.
While I cannot kind of comment on specific numbers, I can say that e-commerce has grown significantly even compared to last year. So we're seeing growth versus last year. And obviously, as a result of that, the share of the e-commerce business has grown in our current year sales.
Interesting. Because I would typically imagine that, categories that, Puma is present in, people would want to sort of go to the store. It's sort of a touch and feel product, try it out, kind of a product. Uh, do you do you believe e-commerce will continue to grow and get a larger share of your overall retail pie?
Well, we actually started our e-commerce business 3-4 years ago, and every year it's been growing significantly. I think what's happening is, first of all, people are familiar with the product, familiar with their sizes, familiar with because we do have a large network of retail stores, so people are familiar with that kind of information. What we've also done is kind of overinvested in our website to make sure that the shopping in the website is a process that is easy for customers, where people are able to kind of shop intuitively. They can look for, the kind of requirements that they've got. So I think between the two, because of the fact that we are present pretty much across the country, and the website is, we believe, easily navigatable for consumers, we are seeing a lot of traction, and not just our website but also in other marketplaces.
Yeah.
Puma is doing well.
That's fantastic. I think that's very heartening to hear. When I first heard of, Zappos, back in the US markets, and I was positively surprised that, the kind of traction they were able to get. I would imagine footwear is something that we would all want to try out, but I think, COVID has also forced consumers to start thinking about buying remotely and taking that chance, right? This is that the first time, it's that nudge that is needed to try it out the first time, and if it works, then hopefully these consumers will stick as well. So
Yeah, you're very right, Ankur, because I think what we are seeing is that, we are getting, the penetration to pin codes has extended significantly, like, tier 2, tier 3 cities. We're actually seeing that traction. So I think a lot of people are purchasing digitally and experiencing that for the first time, not just in our category, but in other categories as well, which will have, I think, a fairly significant impact in how retail, operates.
yeah. And if I were to, ask you more from the, CFO's lens and the finance leader's lens, what has been your approach to financial planning and forecasting with the onset of COVID? How are you sort of dealing with the uncertainty, on ground post the lockdown?
So, I mean, obviously, being a German company, we have a very, very robust budgeting and planning system where we plan. And obviously, being in the category that we're in, where we have to plan 18 months in advance for, products and design and things like that, we do plan fairly in advance. But thanks to COVID, we've had to kind of throw out a fair bit of our forecasting out of the window. And and I think that is obviously, it's kind of taught us, I believe, as finance leaders, and I speak to a number of CFOs, I think we've learned to become more nimble and more adaptable, I think. Okay. And I think if you ask me about my approach to planning, and it's not rocket science. I mean, it's, I think, what many people have also adopted. On the revenue side, really, in March, April, we had no clue what was going to happen, right? I mean, we didn't know when we were going to be opening up. We didn't know how the lockdowns are going to progress, how the disease is going to progress in India, how our supply chain is going to work. We knew that we had bought an inventory, and a lot of the inventory is already committed. And as a company, we did not revisit our commitments, and we kind of stuck to them. So we knew that we had a certain pipeline that was coming in, but that's about all we knew. So I think on the revenue side, of course, we had to then get into a scenario planning mode and saying, okay, optimistic, pessimistic, realistic, what do you think? And then keep revisiting those scenarios every few months to kind of say, okay, what will be our revenues, what will be the cash flow, and therefore what would be, the net negative, or what would be our cash position at any given point in time, right? So that was our approach to revenue and, I think, cash, if I look at it. On the OPEX side and on the spend side, I think our approach was, of course, much more around the zero-based budgeting standpoint. So apart from essential, committed, contracted spends, which we did not, revisit, and which because we believe that we have a commitment and hence we have to follow through to that commitment. Barring that, whatever was discretionary in nature, we kind of, we obviously revisited it. We wanted to have a clear ROI around that. And I think that is the approach that we've taken in all discretionary spend areas, right?
Yeah. And you mentioned forecasts, you sort of, look at forecasts every few months. Post lockdown, do you see the need of, looking at this a lot more frequently, let's say every month or maybe even more frequently? I mean, do things change as frequently on ground? Or do you think, quarterly forecasts still hold as far as your business is concerned?
I think given our industry and our category, I think planning is even more important because we are placing, as I said, we have to purchase our products months in advance. And given that, and we are dealing with factories who obviously have requirements, you know, uh, who have to purchase raw materials as well, and we are dealing with suppliers, so we have to plan. The problem, of course, is that we don't know exactly how things are going to shape and how things are going to pan out. So I think the important discussion that we've had to have both internally and with our global counterparts is the element of risk and the degree of risk that we want to take on the forecast, right? And hence on our purchases. I think that is basically dynamic and ongoing. I think one of the things that happen is that a lot of these things, are not visible, right? Because when you take a forecast, you are kind of assuming business as usual with growth, and that's the challenge and debate that you always have with business leaders. How much are you going to grow your top line, your margins? How much is your profitability going to grow? That is a discussion. But I think here the discussion has become much more specific to what are the assumptions which are inherent in those numbers, and based on those assumptions, how much of the risk are we willing to take as a company? And
Yeah.
so that dialogue around the level of risk that we are taking is, I think, something that has become much more tangible, and I think that is something that is also is an important discussion, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's, you sort of hit the nail on the head. Planning, for those risk tolerance. How do you sort of plan for that? And does that also mean that from a supply chain standpoint, there has been a material sort of shift from status quo for you post pandemic?
Not really, in the sense that a lot of our vendors, manufacturers, etc., are long-standing relationships, people that we've been working with for several years,
Yeah.
because we obviously have, as a company, fairly stringent, quality standards and things like that. So they have kind of gone through all the certification, and it's not something that we can change from year to year or month to month.
Yeah.
So I think that has not changed, and but I think the level of communication that we had to do collectively has obviously increased,
Yeah.
because while our sales might have gone down, they've already taken purchase calls, and hence we needed to have that dialogue very clearly and obviously, even if we can't pick up, they've already bought raw material, they've already invested in working capital. So we've actually had to have that dialogue on how much we can support and what we can do.
Yeah, and that's an interesting topic because increasingly we've been seeing corporates figuring out a way to support their partner ecosystem, either on the supply side or even on the sort of distributor retailer side of things. In your case, what's been the impact of COVID on the SME ecosystem, especially on your supply chain, on your upstream supply chain side?
Right. See, as far as SME impact is concerned, I think, like I said earlier, we, since our planning and our purchase and our relationships are also fairly long term in nature, I think the most important piece that we've had to do is to give them complete clarity around our plans,
Yeah.
what we are doing, how is it going to impact them, what is the cash flow going to be, and also what is the support that they require to kind of weather this particular time frame.
Yeah.
Because and I think that that dialogue is something that our sourcing team has been doing continuously with suppliers.
Mm. Has it also meant that have you guys explored any kind of supply chain financing solution for suppliers, or have they felt the need for managing their own working capital? Um, I'm sure there have been some stress in the finances. How have you looked at dealing with that?
So I think we already have a pretty very robust supply chain financing solution in place, which is to kind of which they can access to, and where the rates are pretty competitive.
Right.
Beyond that, I think the problem was really in Q2 when supply chain financing kicks in when the goods reach your warehouse, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so and you can discount it immediately. I think some of the problems that happened in Q2 is that obviously the goods could not reach because the country was in lockdown, and the logistics piece had still not been opened up.
Yeah.
So at that time, there was obviously a stretch as far as suppliers are concerned, because a lot of them had actually already purchased raw materials. That in some cases they had manufactured the goods as well, and suddenly they could not ship it out because of the lockdown. I think in those instances, I think our sourcing team and finance were talking pretty much continuously to kind of say where, what are the problem, and we've also given advances in some cases to kind of help, their working capital situation. So I think that's how we kind of collectively manage the problem to the
Oh, that's
extent we could.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you seen, when we've been speaking to clients and corporates across sectors, we're increasing, to them as they think about their own sort of forecasting and planning, and of course, supply chain management. Any thoughts, any words of wisdom for the listeners on that?
About the risks that you're taking. And that will obviously change as per industry segments, right? In the case of retail, it is the inventory bet that you're making. And, and given that, then in each scenario, what does it impact you? What does it mean for your future plans? I think that is something that we need to kind of get your arms around fairly quickly. The second piece is to be fairly collaborative in this exercise, because from a finance perspective, obviously we are more involved more in cash, but I think you need to have that dialogue and discussion with the relevant teams who are kind of handling that risk operationally, right? Whether it be sourcing, whether it be supply chain, to kind of have an ongoing discussion so that they are clear around it. And I think the third piece is that, particularly cash in this situation, I was having this discussion with a bunch of CFOs. In many cases, at least prior to COVID, cash was something that the finance team managed. There are a lot of other KPIs which are kind of very clear to everybody in the business, but cash as a KPI tends to be a very finance and potentially the CEO KPI. But I think this is now a KPI that is pretty much across the organization. And I think it's very important during something like this to make sure that all the stakeholders are completely aware of your cash flow planning, because they can contribute to it. They should be aware of it. And, and whatever they can do to support it is something that you need to kind of build. So there is also a bit of culture of change management that needs to happen as a finance professional within the organization, so that they're clear about what are your issues that you are grappling with, right, as a company and as a leadership team.
That's interesting. And when you say stakeholders, to what level are we talking here? Only the senior leadership, or maybe?
We actually proliferated it down quite. I mean, we were very, very transparent, I think, as an organization. We used to have town halls every month where our CEO used to kind of take people through exactly what's happening in the business. I think that communication is important so that people don't feel that scared, worried, lost, and you're sitting at home and you're reading all these newspaper reports, and that can really cause stress. So I think we kind of communicated pretty much continuously. And the second piece is, and in those sessions, we also talked about what we were going to do. And so I think that communication was there. And I think then people can contribute. There are people in different levels of the organization who written into me saying, oh, we were, I've saved this much, I was able to do this. And I think that kind of shows, and that's a function of communication, right? And every little helps.
Yeah. Also, it sets a certain DNA in the organization when you see this happening top down, where there is a very clear focus and there is a clear communication around what are the priorities and how are we approaching things. That level of buy-in starts coming in at the at the lowest levels as well, and
Absolutely.
that's a great point. And which actually is a great segue into the next topic I wanted to touch upon, which was essentially the future of the workplace itself, and how do you see that evolving, especially given the segment and the category you operate in. From an employee standpoint, how do you see this playing out post pandemic?
Okay. I mean, that's an interesting question. And I think my response is not going to be specific to Puma, but large by and large, because I mean, I talk to a lot of people from different industries, from different places. And I think what's happening is that I think as a country, while some segments had adopted working from home or being digital in the workplace and all of that, by and large, we had not done any of that, right? And I think we continue to have fairly traditional setups in most companies where you come in, you commute to work, and then you work from office, and then you leave. I
Yeah.
think this has kind of opened up the eyes that it is possible to work digitally. It's possible to be equally productive digitally. I've had, people who are traditional managers tell me that I never expected that, we could still give a certain level of outcome. I mean, we are doing audits now digitally, so there are so many things that we are actually handling. And I think that going back to a question on office, the design of the office in the future is going to change. Uh, I think because I think people are going to say, do I have to invest that much on office space? Can we still, have some level of this operating and have that flexibility operating? So I think that longer term, there would be an impact on commercial real estate for sure.
How do you see what's the typical office going to look like, let's say 2 years down the line?
You were in consulting before, right? And I used to be a consultant as well. And I think in consulting, we've had, even from 20 years back, we've had the concept of hot desking, right? So
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have a workplace. You will always have, you go work out of client sites, and then you come back, and maybe 3-4 people are using one office, right?
Yeah.
But I think even companies are going to, so it's not a new concept, right? It used to be a concept that companies in consulting, maybe some in IT, have already adopted, right? But I think that is something that I think companies will also look at. Do I really need to have everyone, especially in places which are expensive from a real estate standpoint? I mean, I don't understand why, for example, if entire Bombay, the commercial real estate where people are spending, thousands and thousands of rupees per square feet on real estate, you really need that size of an office. Can you still work from with 50% capacity in the office and kind of do hot desking? So I think some of those tenets, which are established in certain industries, will start moving into other industries as well.
Do you see people ever going back to a 5-day work week? Like
I
5
think I think people will, right? I mean, because right now the work week, thanks to work from home, is 5 days, if not more, right?
Yeah. But will it be
So I don't see.
rotational, do you think? Or do you believe, for instance, will it be a mix of, 2 days out of office, 3 days out of home, or,
Yeah, it could be rotational. It could be like, teams were having, 1 day, 2 days of work from home kind of a concept. I think those kind of things will happen. Or, for example, if you have a good performer who wants to work from a different city, uh, you know, giving the flexibility for people to do that, I think those kind of options will certainly become applicable.
yeah. I think the big risks there potentially is that of ensuring affiliation with the organization, ensuring there's a certain office culture, work culture that defines an organization. Being able to retain that while employees are still working remotely. I'm not sure how Puma's handled that during the lockdown. but I'd love to hear your perspective on that particular aspect, given that, let's say, more and more people will start spending more and more time working remotely.
No, that's a very good question, and I think that is something that HR practices will have to evolve to kind of handle. I think, I mean, obviously, in the future workplace, I'm not suggesting that this kind of a thing would continue forever. There would still be the concept of coming into work, I would assume, for a few days or few weeks, but not continuously. But people like Google, Facebook, etc., are already talking about actually making this a permanent thing, and people working from whichever city that they are in, and the city could be less expensive. And so you're hearing these concepts in the US already, right? So I think that will, and see here, as far as our experience during the lockdown is concerned, I think I already said that we used to have a town hall once a week. We used to have weekly check-ins with our team. We would do function meetings, and especially for smaller teams. Smaller teams talking to each other on a continuous basis is something that is important. We use Microsoft Teams extensively, so you have groups where people can chat and people can communicate. I mean, it's not ideal, of course, especially if you're new to the organization and you're still trying to build up, you know, a question. You like, for example, if you're a newcomer and you want to just ask a casual question, you could do that at tea. You could go and at a break, you could just have the question answered. Whereas setting up a call, talking to somebody is a much more difficult, question. So it's things that we're grappling with. But yes, communication, I guess, continues to remain the key over here.
Yeah, I suspect given the sort of business model you operate and the space that you operate in, there would be a fair bit of on-ground workforce in retail outlets, etc. I guess does that also change in any material way, or do you see that to be remaining status quo post-COVID?
I think there are 2, 3 things that changed. I mean, obviously, our store staff, they're great. I mean, even in the current situation, they kind of came back, and they've been absolute rock stars in terms of handling, all the sanitation, hygiene. I mean, there are a lot of new norms that we put in place that they've had to learn and train for. So I think they've done all of that. I think even there, we are, what we are doing is obviously from a health and safety standpoint, it's not just a one-way thing, but also what precautions they need to take because they are interacting with the larger public. We've also kind of, again, communicated with them continuously about, with them in terms of their concerns, their questions, if there are any issues that they have. I think we've again, there too, communication is the key.
Yeah. But I'm assuming the rotational mechanism won't really work in the retail store.
No. I mean, our stores are small, so
fair enough. And Vidya, one topic I definitely wanted to get your thoughts on was around the role of women at the workplace, and how is that evolving post-COVID, especially given the whole remote working. We are seeing some segments of women actually entering the workforce through remote opportunities, even to sort of support their family's finances, given the stress that they are seeing on that front. Some other segments of women have actually migrated back home, given the challenges of COVID. What are your thoughts on how this will impact women in the workforce, both office goers as well as, let's say, retail and commercial workforce?
Yeah. So I think I do some amount of work with women groups, and more unofficially, and work as a mentor in certain women related organizations. So I think this is a discussion that has been happening fairly continuously in the last 6 months. I think women, whether they are working, non-working, or working at home, whatever be the case, I think there's been a significantly higher amount of pressure that has come upon them, and so I'm hearing, stories of how women have to do, a full day's work, but also do a full day's work at home because the help is not there. There's no, because of the lockdown, you have childcare, you have, kids going to school, and a lot of that burden, in many households, tend to fall wholly or partly on the on the woman. So I think that obviously has caused stress and has there has been a lot of cries for help, so I mean I hear a lot more communication in these groups about that kind of issue happening. So I think there are three buckets I would like to kind of place this in. One is, some are good and some are bad. The good part, if I can start with, is that I think I've had, for example, women who are about to come back from maternity leave, who in my team, who, for example, would have come back in March, but then thanks to the lockdown, have had a chance to kind of forced to stay at home for the next few months, and they've been able to balance their work, they've been able to balance the child, and they've been able to balance everything, and it gives them a lot more flexibility. And I think that has kind of also given me a fresh appreciation that people, especially people who took a break from work and who had to go home but who have a few hours that they can spare, I think it would give them a good chance to actually come back to the workplace, because they can still continue to do that without having the stress that they'll have to commute for a couple of hours and they'll have to take time. They can't do full time, but they can do part time. So I think those opportunities can open up. There are certain opportunities that women have had to be able to balance their work and home a little better. So I think that is a good thing that has happened thanks to COVID. The negative that I'm worried about is about, especially younger women, the age group of, about to get married, who kind of come to the cities, who are working from the cities, who took and who kind of were convincing their parents from year to year, saying, give me a couple of more years and then I'll get married and settle down. And, I will continue working, and built up their resume career, gives them a little bit of independence. There is at least a little bit of work experience that they have. And now a lot of them have had to go back home and obviously are under pressure to get married, and their life's trajectory could change in some cases significantly, right? And I think that is something that I do worry about. That if, for example, the ability to have a career gets compromised, and hence independence gets compromised, that's not a win. And I think the second piece that happens is, again, mental health, where you're balancing a lot, and and you're not getting support either at home or at work or both. Then that can also be traumatic. So I think those two things are the issues that could impact women during COVID.
And what organizations do to sort of solve for some of these challenges? What are some of the imperatives for leaders listening in? What should they be thinking about?
I think there are two or three things that we've been discussing, both within Puma and also within my women groups. One is, I think it's very important to actually adopt work from home as a way to actually have a structured calendar. If people have to block out a couple of hours in their calendar, then they need to do that. I think the other piece that is also happening is, because it's work from home, the hours of home are getting blurred. That you get calls after, for example, you have this time where you kind of say, okay, I'm done for the day. You're commuting back home, but now people think that people are available throughout and can call you at any given point in time. I think it's important to have a clear work day, which actually ends and gives, and you have to respect people's time. I also have situations, whether it be women or others, colleagues, who write to me and say, listen, I won't be available for an hour because I have something else to do. And you have to respect that, right? I mean, you have to kind of say that you have to be aware that people have a life beyond work, and you have to be able to balance, the work requirements with personal requirements. And I think that's very important as leaders to be aware and conscious of that. Um, and finally, I think one of the things that is that can happen is, you may not be exactly having the same issue, but either because of the fact that you have a help at home, whether because you are older and you're beyond all these things that are happening, and you're more senior and whatever else. But you have to be cognizant that there are others who are grappling with very real issues, that I have to do jadu pocha this morning, and there is a call that has got scheduled for 8:30, and you can't attend that call because your child is just logging into homeschool. I mean, I think that piece is you need to learn to be a little more sensitive.
Yeah, I think empathy is the key in all of this, especially since we can't see them in person. It's very hard to relate to challenges that people are going through in their respective homes. So all the more reason for business leaders to proactively and deliberately think about the potential challenges that employees might be going through and try to solve for that. I think great points. Thank you so much, Vidya. And look, as we wrap up, any sort of words of wisdom on what CFOs and finance leaders can do to sort of within their own functions and more broadly in their organizations to sort of help women in the workplace. Any other thoughts that you would share?
Okay, from a CFO perspective, I think one learning for myself, which I would like to share, is that no matter how experienced and senior you think you are, the world can throw you a curveball, right? And I think so. Therefore, it's important to kind of be aware of whatever is happening, right? I mean, and that means that is learning, education, and people keep saying yes, change is only change, but it's not just change. It's about preparing yourself for that, right? And just kind of building up your skill sets to be able to deal with it. So I think that's important. As a woman and as a um, and as a woman leader, I think for me, and it's work in progress, right? I mean, it's very easy to get carried away by the immediate requirements of the job and what needs to be delivered today, tomorrow. But like you rightly said, empathy, and at least learning to listen, because and I'm a culprit for that also. Sometimes you're just caught up in whatever's happening at that particular point in time. And at least at work, you are able to see that person, right? You can pick up cues a little more easily when you're right in front of the person and the person is looking tired, angry, upset, whatever. It's more difficult to do that, on a Zoom call. So I think just learning that piece and at least be a little more present and listening, I think is something I've at least tried to learn during this period.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Vidya. I think this has been absolutely fantastic. I think that's pretty much it from us, on this episode of Cashflow Unscripted. Vidya, we hope to have you back on the show soon again. But for now, I think that's all from us here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here, and it was a really fun discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening in. If you enjoyed this episode, do consider subscribing to us on Spotify or Apple so we can gently remind you when the next episode is out. Stay safe and have a good day. Talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye.